Hey guys, how you doing? Very interesting topic today. I'm going to reconsider a little bit Dr. Sarno's theories and interpretations, and immediately I want to say that if you're feeling anxious about this, like, oh my God, are you saying Dr. Sarno is wrong? His theories are wrong? And like that was my only hope. Can I now recover? First of all, I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying there are some adjustments that we can make, reinterpret certain aspects. And two, these rethinkings are actually going to enhance our recoveries, going to help us avoid some of the potential traps, and they're going to g- provide us with hopefully a more accurate understanding of what's going on, permitting us to then take even more targeted action. Yeah, so let me just get right to it and say that the main crux of my rethinking, my disagreement, if you will, is the whole Freudian conception. You know, the whole focus on unconscious anger, repressed emotions, that way of interpreting the situation. I think it could be formulated better. I don't think it's quite the right way to think about it. And I'm saying this not as a scientist, not as a research psychologist, just as someone who consumes what they produce, you know, mainly in book form and some occasional papers. And most of all, just as someone who's going through this process, reflecting, cross-referencing the theory with personal experience, and someone who's making great strides in recovery. Um, so I want to say first of all that I believe Dr. Sarno had tremendous insight, and it far outweighs all the stuff that I'm going to talk about, the criticism, the rethinking. Yeah, his main insight, I think, was that fear of symptoms can amplify them and perpetuate them. Yeah, and his other insight related to that was that usually the medical establishment, the doctors, in patients like these, they will reinforce the fear. They will say, hey, look, this is wrong with you. This is wrong with you. This is wrong with you. You know, you have a herniated disc. You have this. You have that. And the other thing, they give names to these conditions that make them bigger in the person's head. You know, and so in this way, the symptoms get amplified and perpetuated. You know, very often, and I've experienced it myself. And of course, if there are any serious conditions, they must be ruled out. So you must go see a doctor if you haven't, and you must be examined by a qualified physician to make sure your symptoms aren't caused by some serious condition. But once that's been done, you know, you've got to sort of decide if you think you're really terribly sick or what's going on with you. You know, but so these are the fundamental insights of Dr. Sardo. And the other aspect, the huge aspect, is that people are in emotional distress usually. People who experience these kinds of symptoms pretty much are always in some kind of emotional distress. Something's going on in their lives, you know. Uh, they're in a difficult relationship, they've had a lot of stress, they've dealt with the death of a loved one, just a million life stressors, emotional difficulties, you know, life difficulties that we can all go through. And sometimes we can fall into these conditions. Other people develop addictions, you know, different things can result. But uh, the fact that there's a tremendous mind-body interaction going on, you know, that was a huge insight of Dr. Sarno. He wasn't the first one. It's been sort of wisdom of the centuries, but it's a wisdom that's been lost. And now we have a chance to reformulate that wisdom with the benefit of modern science, modern psychological understanding, modern medicine. Uh, and there are people working in that area, you know, reconceptualizing these things in modern terms. And so I think this whole distraction theory that Dr. Sarno proposes is not quite right. I don't think it's quite right. This Freudian, you know, repressed emotions must be distracted from by the symptoms. I'm not so sure about that. I think it's still useful. That belief is still useful for recovery, ironically, even if it's wrong. But it can also, in certain people, it can mislead you in a certain way. It can keep you stuck, and I'll explain in a second what I mean. But I don't think it's quite right, simply put. And that can put off a lot of scientifically minded people from Dr. Sarno's theories. So that's why I think it's important to reconsider. If you are, for example, scientifically minded and you're reading about this stuff, you know that Freud has sort of been discredited, and for good reasons. Many of his theories. But the thing is, Dr. Sarno was coming about was developing his theories based on seeing patients, many patients, thousands of patients, and he was working with his staff of in rehab center that he worked at. There was a staff of psychologists. This is in New York City, 70s, 80s. The Freudian analytic paradigm was sort of dominant, I think, at that time. New York City was kind of a bastion for Freudian analytic psychology. And so they spoke about things in these Freudian terms. They conceptualized everything within the Freudian framework. And it's workable. It's entirely workable, and you can make total recoveries within that framework, but maybe we can do better. Maybe we can accelerate things, and maybe we can avoid some pitfalls. So to reiterate my beef, if you will, with Dr. Sarno, my issue is this. I'm not so sure about the distraction theory, and I'm not so sure about the Freudian repression mechanisms. But I think even there's like some truth. I think we often perceive our emotions as threatening. That's the way I always phrase it. It's threatening emotions, which is quite similar, right? It's just that we might have been encouraged by our family. Whenever we experienced and expressed emotions, we might have been punished for it. To open up might have been actually to provoke anger from our parents or from our teachers or from whomever, maybe even in our relationships. Basically, feeling emotions and expressing emotions was kind of punished in a way, right? By the people near us. And so we've learned, either from a very young age or a little bit later, that, oh my God, I'm feeling something, and this could lead to this punishment that I'm used to experiencing. So it's immediately perceived as threatening. Also, if you have a kind of a self-image that, I'm speaking about myself now, that I always wanted to seem like I'm in total control of my emotions. So anytime I would start getting angry or upset about something, I would really make like a face, and I try not to express it, right? Because I didn't want it to be perceived as someone who's not in control of his emotions. I had sort of a self-image of what a man is and all that stuff, and gotta be stoic. So, and in that process, okay, it's one thing that you don't express emotions to others, but you sort of also start to ignore what's going on with you, not paying attention. You lose touch with yourself, essentially. So now as I speak about this, I sort of realize that it doesn't sound too far from the Freudian concept of repressed emotions, but I still think it's kind of different. And I think the mind creating symptoms to distract us, I don't think that's quite right. That's probably wrong. I think what happens is this perception of threat puts us in this wired state. It triggers our fight or flight system, that stress response system that is designed to respond to immediate threats, immediate dangers. The classical example being the tiger, in the woods or whatever. Being under direct attack. That's what that system is for. But if it's getting constantly triggered by emotional threats, social threats, and also how we relate to ourselves, right? If we're perfectionists, if we're saying you must, where it's coming from is the perception that if you don't accomplish, if you you know, don't achieve that you're not good enough, you will be ostracized, you will be alone, you will not be loved, and that kind of, now it's primarily in our heads when we're adults, uh, there's a way that it formed and it's individual for each person. But the point I'm trying to make is that our psychology, the way we think, it is perceived as a threat. That's just how we perceive it. That's how our minds, brains have formed to perceive these kinds of things as threats. And as a consequence, they're always putting pressure on that fight or flight system. And, the other part of fight or flight, right? You've heard the term fight or flight. The other part of it is rest and digest, right? So we've got these two modes, and I'm not a scientist. This is just a crude understanding that is plenty sufficient for our needs as people who just need to recover. So there's fight or flight, there's rest and digest. And the rest and digest is when the body recovers, when it repairs sort of damage, when it takes care of ourselves, and when it just recharges, right? So if we don't spend enough time in that state because we are constantly feeling under attack, constantly feeling unsafe, just feeling fundamentally unsafe, so it's this chronic state we're in, we're going to develop issues. And one of those issues is going to be pain and fatigue. And because our system, our threat detection system, is already heightened, it's going to perceive the pain itself and the fatigue itself and other symptoms themselves as threats, creating this vicious cycle. This is what I think happens. I think this is the main way to think about it, And as that the symptoms are a distraction doesn't quite resonate with me, just based on my experience and based on what I understand about psychology and how the mind and body work together. I don't think the brain is saying, oh no, don't look at the emotion, here's a symptom for you to distract. Not sure about that. But I don't really think that's the main insight of Dr. Sarno, The main insights I already discussed. And so I think it's important to sort of address these things, because one of the pitfalls that I notice people fall into, when I was reading like message boards, TMS message boards, Dr. Sarno sent message boards, which I don't read anymore, but I would see things like, I remember people would say, well, I still have symptoms. And the response they would often get is, well, you just got to find and feel that emotion, that you're distracting yourself from. And often people are looking for things that aren't there anymore, and they're spending a lot of time revisiting the past and revisiting the past and revisiting the past and re-traumatizing themselves. I think there's value to analyzing your past, looking at what happened to you, extracting lessons from it, and then letting it go, soothing. Now, I know, depending on individual experience, that could be a longer process, and it could be a more difficult process. I understand that, I don't mean to sound like, hey, move on, just don't dwell on the past. No. Stuff happens, and sometimes it takes time to deal with it, but we don't want to get stuck, in the past. It's because the reason we're dealing with it is so that we can move on, we're not dealing with it so we can live in the past. So I think if you can make the sort of, you can go off track by looking for that unfelt emotion a bit too much, and you start stressing, well, I gotta find the emotion. Where's the emotion? And now that same thing is happening. You're feeling threat. You're feeling a sense of stress that, oh my God, if I haven't found the emotion, I can't recover until I find the emotion. If you've written about your past, you've probably uncovered whatever you need to uncover. You've probably rethought it. You don't worry about it so much. Don't get perfectionistic about it. Don't do that. Yeah. So that's what I think happens. This is just how I think of it. It's probably not a major deviation from Dr. Sarno, depending on how you want to look at it. Yeah, that's what I think. And specifically in CFS and fibromyalgia, fibromyalgia especially, they talk about researchers talk about this concept of central sensitization, right? And that is sort of what causes a lot of the pain, is that we just become very sensitive to pain. But they talk about it like it's an immutable thing, like, hey, it happened and now you're centrally sensitized. But in fact, central sensitization can be desensitized, but it can be a very slow process that requires sort of daily attention. Yeah. What sort of comes out of this rethinking of Dr. Sarno's theories for me is that it's probably a lot more important to focus on the present and how you are relating to yourself in the present, how you are relating to the people in your present, how emotionally aware are you in the present. And the benefit of considering the past is so you can affect and make changes for the better in the present. And we shouldn't dwell on the past. We should address it, we should extract lessons, we should soothe it, and we should move on. And I'm hoping Dr. Schubiner is doing some great work, and I'm hoping Dr. Sarno's theories get reformulated in more modern terms that are consistent with modern understanding in psychology, in pain research, so that there could be sort of an integrated approach that does not ignore emotions, that does not ignore psychology, and that is not strictly mechanistic, neuroscience-y, it's all about the neurons, but it also addresses the mind, because the neurons produce the mind produces the neuron. It's like this dance. And I think both formulations, both conceptions of these processes are useful, and personally I've gotten more benefit from the psychological mind approach of thinking about things rather than thinking about things like on the level of the neurons, and hopefully this reformulation can attract more people and to the theories, who are primarily people who are suffering and can get better. I know people can get better from this. It's just undeniable to me after what I've been through. And I don't think I'm an exception. I think many people can go through the same process. And anyway, I'm starting to kind of ramble now. Just wanted to put my thoughts out there. Curious what you think about all this, especially, if there's I doubt it, but if there's any researchers or professional scientists who are sort of in any area related to this, I would really be curious to know what you think about it. But I'm looking at it as just someone who needs to recover, who needs to get his life back, and who needs to help other people do the same, and who needs to communicate in a way that's not like overly sciencey complex. Not because we're dummies, but because we don't need to understand all that. We just need to get better and get back to our lives. And I think the way I formulated things here, I think that's probably a more useful way to approach it. But again, let me know what you think. Let me know how you think about these issues. What has resonated with you? Where are you confused? Where am I not making sense? Can I clarify something? Because I kind of feel like maybe I rambled a little bit. But anyway, let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe and watch other videos on my channel if you're just coming across this for the first time. I've made tremendous progress from bedbound to working out and working and everything. Good luck to you, and I'll see you next time.